Hi, I'm Martha Knox. I'm an artist, and in this video I'm going to talk about the art that I spent the last year making. Submit is a conceptual, time-based art project engaged in institutional critique. Let me explain. From August 31st of last year, 2019, until August 30th of this year, 2020, I created prints that were price tags, each one representing the submission fee for a specific artist opportunity, mostly juried exhibitions. I had 3 rules guiding this project. First, the submission fees had to be for application only, meaning that if an artist's submission is not accepted, then the applicant would receive no benefit. For example, membership organizations that eliminated submission fees for members would be excluded from this project. But organizations that merely offered reduced fees for their members, or which required applicants to become dues-paying members in order to submit, in addition to paying a submission fee, were included. Basically, the only artist opportunities included in this project were ones with a submission fee that posed a risk. An artist could pay and still get nothing back in return. Rule number 2. The price tags had to be created and then posted publicly for sale, marked "Pay What You Want," at least 3 days before the associated opportunities deadline for submission. I listed them on my artist blog and all my social media accounts. If I sold enough from an edition to cover the cost of the corresponding submission fee, then I submitted that tag to that opportunity. That had some interesting results, which I will talk about later. The third and final rule was that all unsold prints, except one artist's proof, archived for documentation purposes only, had to be destroyed, and the blocks used to make them had to be discontinued by being scored after the deadlines for each opportunity passed. Dematerialization of the art object. What's behind me here are some of the archived artist proofs. Just to state what's obvious to people who might be familiar with conceptual art, these prints were not the art. The art was the idea and the act of seeing it through. Now it's finished, and all that's left to present to an audience is the documentation. Over the year, I created 160 unique tags. In addition to the archived artist proofs, I made additions of 2 to 8 for each tag, and all total, they collectively represented $5,032 in submission fees. That number's not arbitrary. $5,000 in submission fees was a goal that I deliberately aimed for when I started this project. I'd read the 2017 Independent Art Market Report from Artfinder. It reported data from a huge survey of independent artists, asking them about their income. What the survey found, among other things, was that nearly half of self-described full-time artists were making less than a quarter of their income off their studio practice, and in America, about half were only making $1,000 to $5,000 a year directly off sales of their art. Now that didn't surprise me in the least. I'm in that half of artists. If I make $5,000 off of my art in a year, that is a very good year. Most of my colleagues that I've met over the years are also in that half. I just take it for granted that only a tiny percentage of artists will actually make a living directly off of their studio practice. Most of us working artists also have to work a day job or depend on being subsidized by our families. Which brings us to labor. The Submit project required approximately 480 hours of my labor. This labor was associated with the research of opportunities, creation of tags, listing tags on social media, processing sales of tags, submitting to artist opportunities when the necessary revenue from sales was collected, and documentation. Incidentally, that doesn't count the labor time I'm spending making this video, And it also doesn't count the labor time spent on grant applications and solo show proposals that are associated with this project. That 480 hours is just the labor time that was necessary to create the Submit project. What this means is that for a year, I spent almost 10 hours a week on this project. And 10 hours a week for an entire year is no small time commitment. And that was also by design. I could have easily come up with a way to make these tags that was simple, quick, and uniform. But that's not how artists go about applying for opportunities. With every single call for artists that artists apply for, we must pore over a prospectus. We must possibly have to investigate the institutions that are offering the opportunity, find out who the jurors are, and then spend a lot of time crafting a proposal that is most likely to get us accepted. On top of that, the formatting for our resumes and images and other application materials widely varies, and so we might have to alter our materials for each application. In making the price tag prints for Submit, I wanted to meaningfully represent all the unpaid labor that working artists invest in our studio practices, and so I hand-carved wood and linoleum blocks for most of the price tag prints. Some of them were printed on paper that I made myself. I included some ceramics juried exhibitions and made tags that involved either pressing the block into clay or printing with glaze onto a ceramic tag that I'd made. I included a juried exhibition for artist books and made tags in the form of hardcover accordion books. I even included a juried exhibition for art quilts, printed on unprimed canvas, which I hand-stitched into an edition of mini quilts. It's like anything in the arts. Think of actors, musicians, writers, dancers. Even after investing years in training, in networking, in developing a solid resume, artists must constantly do excessive amounts of unpaid labor over and over again just to continue having opportunities to get compensation and recognition for our work. Out of the 160 tags that I created, only 36 raised enough revenue from sales to actually submit to their associated opportunities. The submission fees for those 36 submissions added up to $923. I spent $923 last year on submission fees. Of those 36 submitted, 24 applications were rejected and 12 were accepted. I was shocked when I received my first acceptance. I didn't think any of these applications would be accepted for two main reasons. The first is, while these tags they're pretty little prints, they're small and none of them really display an impressive amount of artistic skill. But the main reason I didn't expect any of them to get in is because this whole project critiques the institutional practice of charging artist submission fees. And I didn't think that any institutions that were charging artist submission fees would be willing to platform this kind of work. But some were willing to. 2 of my prints were accepted to juried shows at regional arts institutions, the Maryland Federation of Arts' annual Small Wonders, and the Oxford Art Alliance's Climate Change, What Will You Do? Another tag was accepted to an annual juried exhibition at a university gallery, the Dado Moranville at Valdosta State University. That juror even awarded my print an honorable mention, which was pretty cool. One print was accepted to a museum show, the Marin Mocha's Winter Solstice Juried Exhibition. And that's it for what I found valuable for my resume. The other 8 acceptances, well, one was for Rockford Projects, which is run by Lisa Rockford, a curator, artist, and educator in South Florida. The call was for a group show called Consumed by Consent, but this was a curatorial proposal for inclusion in the Spring Break New York City Art Fair. Ms. Rockford accepted my tag for inclusion in Consumed by Consent, but her curatorial proposal was rejected. She has told me that Consumed by Consent will hopefully happen at some future date through another event or organization. The final 7 acceptances all came from online art galleries that were hosting juried exhibitions. A print was featured in Light, Space, and Time Online Art Gallery's 3rd annual Patterns, Textures, and Forms Art Competition, Fusion Art, which incidentally is run by the same people who run Light, Space, and Time, featured one of my prints in their Sunrises and Sunsets juried show. Another was featured in Envision Art's Happy Fall online juried show. One was featured in the Contemporary Art Gallery Online's 5th annual open/no theme online art competition. Interestingly enough, tags were entered in 2 different shows that were both themed and titled Skies. The first tag became a finalist at Art Room Gallery, and the second was featured at Colors of Humanity Gallery. And finally, one of my prints gained appreciation and was featured in the show Inspirational Botanicals, hosted by the online gallery Art from the Psyche. I am not a fan of online art galleries. Supposedly they're good for the line on the resume, although I would never put any of these shows on my resume. I don't think that these shows impress anybody that has any real pull in the art world. Additionally, I don't think that collectors are typically buying work that they find on these websites, mainly because there are other more slick and reputable places online where collectors can go to shop for art. Now, I could be wrong about that. This is just my opinion based on my last year of experiences. In my assessment, I suspect that these online galleries only exist to raise revenue for the people who are running them. This is the portion of the talk where I answer some of the questions people asked me while I was working on Submit. When I was in graduate school, there was this professor who went on a tirade about charging artist submission fees. In her assessment, this was just a ridiculous practice. Artists already invest so much in the creation of the art, and there was no good reason why venues should be making money off artists. That rant stuck with me, and in the last 14 years since I received my MFA, I can count on one hand the number of times that I've been willing to pay submission fees. That's not counting the $923 from the last year, obviously. And all those times that I did pay those fees, it was for shows that I had connections. I knew I was probably going to get into the show. In some cases, I even knew I was likely to sell or win an award. So I knew there was something in it for me. The fee was not much of a risk. Which is to say, I'm really grateful to that professor. She saved me a lot of money and irritation and disappointment. Today, charging submission fees is an industry standard. Fees have been becoming more common over the years, and they have been also going up in price. And they are charged by nonprofits, by galleries associated with universities, even institutions whose mission is to more widely represent the artists in the community. And even though submission fees clearly provide an advantage for people who already have overrepresentation in the arts. And why do commercial galleries charge fees? They're supposed to make their money off commissions of sales. And we all just accept this, even though it perpetuates systemic injustices that, ironically, people in the art world often love to give lip service to. I made this project because I'm not a professor of art who can go on rants to the next generation of young and emerging artists, and I'm not an activist who can organize an effective protest. I am an artist, and this is a topic I cared about, so I made art about it. Each price tag print was brought into existence for a specific opportunity. It was to raise revenue to pay for that submission fee. And then if that revenue was raised, these tags had the additional purpose of being submitted to that opportunity. And if they got into the opportunity, then they had the additional purpose of actually going there to be shown or whatever the opportunity was. After the deadlines passed, after the shows were over, they no longer served any purpose. This is a note I sent along with the print that was exhibited at the Dado Moranville Gallery. Basically, I avoided spending money on return postage for unsold work by telling the curator I don't need the print back. I saved all the ashes and smashed bits of the 216 prints that I destroyed, as well as all 160 discontinued blocks used to create them. By destroying the unsold prints, documenting their destruction, and archiving the remains, I restored their purpose. The best opinion piece I've read on this topic was The Case Against Art Show Fees by Daniel Grant, and I've included a link in the description below. I bring it up because that piece was published in 2011, and toward the end it mentions that Artist Equity had attempted to pressure the United States Interior Department to stop charging a $50 fee to enter the annual duck stamp competition. After I read that, I looked up the duck stamp contest to find out if Artist Equity had been at all successful. It was not. The submission fee to enter the federal duck stamp competition in 2020 was a whopping $125, by far the most expensive fee I encountered while working on this project. There were definitely some tags that I liked better than others. One that I and a lot of other people liked a lot, and that's maybe my favorite, was the one that I made for a Dolly Parton themed juried show that was hosted by Slocum Galleries at East Tennessee State University. I knew a Dolly tag had to have some extra special flair, so I added a fancy frame, and I hand painted some portions with gold acrylic paint, and I added some silver glitter to Dolly's silhouette. I sold enough of this tag to enter the show, but disappointingly it was rejected. When I first started Submit, I had to put a lot of my other studio projects on the back burner, and while I would love to say that I'm going to go back and continue all those projects, I don't know that that's the case anymore, and I doubt that they would continue in the manner that they had been going before I did this project. Art making is an intense process. It's a lot of mental labor that changes an artist over time. I don't feel the same way as I did a year ago, not only about the topic that this project addressed, but about my studio practice in general. I have some ideas about how to move forward, but mainly I'm curious about how my experiences over the last year will shape what's to come. Thanks for watching this talk. If you know anyone who might be interested in the Submit project, I hope you'll share this video with them. You can find out more about my work at marthaknox.com, and if you're not afraid of clowns, check out some of the other videos on this channel. Peace.